We are drilling down now on how Justice Anthony Kennedy's retirement will have an impact on the Supreme Court for generations to come.
President Trump last night said 40 years or more. With a president who is not likely to pick another swing voter, there's concern about several controversial issues that are already settled by the court for now. Here's where Trump and Vice President Pence stand on some of those issues.
What should the law be on abortion?
Well, I have been pro-life.
I know. What should the law? I know your principle. That's a good value, but what should be the law?
There has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah.
I truly do believe if all of us do all that we can, that we will once again, in our time, restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law.
Should some form of abortion always be legal?
Well, to me, I have exceptions. Rape, incest, if the mother is going to die.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. And you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
You said a few years ago that you were evolving on that issue. Where are you?
I'm traditional marriage. It is changing rapidly.
Do you support marriage equality?
It's irrelevant because it was already settled. It's law. It was settled in the Supreme Court. I mean, it's done.
So even if you appoint a judge that...
It's done. You have, these cases have gone to the Supreme Court. They've been settled. And I think I'm fine with that.
Well, that was clear as mud. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Sean Maloney of New York, who's running for state attorney general. Derek Johnson is the president of the NAACP, and Raul Reyes is an attorney and columnist.
All right, Congressman, President Trump may have been fine with same-sex marriage being decided by the court, but we know Mike Pence, and evangelicals or not, and that evangelical community is Trump's base. They have stuck with him through thick and thin, held their nose. Why? Because of all of those federal judges appointed, because of now not one, but two Supreme Court judges that the president steamrolled into happening. Are you worried about the future of marriage equality?
Yes, and everybody should be worried. Look, 3 years ago, I stood just a short distance from here and celebrated with thousands of pro-marriage equality supporters, and my marriage for the first time was recognized under federal law. So this is a personal issue. You're talking about the most important issue in my life. I've been with my husband for 26 years, but we've only been married for 4. And I'll tell you what, that is on the line. So I think we all ought to get off the couch on this one, and it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says. We ought to know that by now. It matters a lot who he picks, and that person is going to come after the 4 key gay civil rights decisions that were authored by Anthony Kennedy and Roe v. Wade and a bunch of other stuff, and it is go time for progressives who care about the future of our country.
But, Congressman, are Democrats playing this the wrong way? President Obama could have appointed someone to round out the year. And while people could say they don't like Mitch McConnell, he's not a good guy, he's a hypocrite, he is a tactical beast. And he's gotten 1, now 2 Supreme Court justices in that seat. So taking the high road and being the nice guy appears to have a lot of people finishing last.
Stephanie, you got that exactly right. I think Democrats screwed the pooch on the Merrick Garland thing, and this day was always going to come when we got rolled on that and we let them get away with it. And then we lost an election and we got rolled on the 60-vote threshold on the Gorsuch thing. So as clear as day, we should have seen this coming, and now there is very little we can do about it except scream at the top of our lungs and organize and fight back like in the Attorney General's office in New York and every other way we can. But you're right. These guys have been playing for keeps, and we have been getting screwed. And it is a clear result of having sat around and let them get away with the Merrick Garland thing, and that is on Barack Obama's head, and it is on the senators who let it happen a couple of years back. and now we are limited in our options. And some of us who are in the crosshairs of this thing aren't going to forget that.
All right. I'm interested in pursuing in a minute what you mean when you say it's go time, because I think that's the question. But, Derek, let's just bring in the conversation about affirmative action. Kennedy wrote the 4-3 majority opinion upholding the University of Texas's program, but he didn't seem all that enthusiastic about it. One of the things to know about Anthony Kennedy is, as much as people describe him as originally a conservative, he was almost more of a libertarian. So affirmative action sometimes scratches him the wrong way. But what do you see happening with a more traditionally conservative justice if cases like this come up again, and they are likely to?
Well, I'm concerned about voting rights. There's a plethora of decisions that this Supreme Court could decide. For the NAACP, we see this as a state of emergency. If the court is stacked, it would mean the rollback of civil rights advances that we've celebrated over the last 50 years. You know, many individuals like to quote Dr. King, but they don't want to live the reality of which he spoke. And this president, this Senate, is creating a real problem for the advancement of this country. And unfortunately, this Supreme Court may end up hearing whether or not this president committed a level of treason. Don't forget, we're still under an investigation. The Mueller investigation has not concluded. And I hope it don't end up in the Supreme Court that's stacked by his appointments.
Okay, Raul, when it comes to voting rights, The Atlantic says this could be one of the changes we see the soonest. We have already seen conservatives give a victory to Republican gerrymandering in Texas, voter purging in Ohio. With another Trump appointee, will the era of court protecting civil rights be over?
That could very well be the case. And as we've seen recently, the court has chipped away incrementally of things that we have that we had taken for granted for decades in terms of the gerrymandering, the right to purge, to strike voters from the rolls. So there will very likely be more cases in this vein to again and again erode these protections. And aside from the politics that is involved, I see what another danger in this is that we will have segments of the electorate, for example, African-American voters, Latino voters, minority groups who come to view the court as not looking out for our interests. And that is just, whatever your views on these issues, it's not healthy for our democracy when you have a significant portion of the electorate that has lost faith in our institutions. And couple that with a president we know he has authoritarian tendencies. So if he nominates someone with a very like-minded way of thinking, things that we've taken for granted very well
this is important. So Derek calls it a state of emergency. Congressman Maloney, you say it's go time, but Stephanie and I are really struggling with what that means, Congressman. What does go time look like? Because there are marches and there are protests, and that's all interesting. But when you look at Congress and you look at the people making this decision, they look a whole lot like they looked 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
When people say we're going to take to the streets, that makes for a beautiful image, but none of those people in the street are involved in confirming the next Supreme Court justice.
No, fair point. Fair point. And we should have seen this coming when we got rolled on Merrick Garland, and we shouldn't have taken for granted that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And it was a short-sighted mistake to end the 60-vote filibuster, both for the circuit courts and now for the Supreme Court. And we are going to reap the consequences of that. But there is an election coming up, including for the United States Senate. And the most important thing the American public can do is to get involved in these elections and to send new people to Congress in both houses. You can end this nonsense.
To that exact point, the Democrats know what their party is and what their message is. In just a few moments, Allie and I are going to sit down with the young woman who beat Joe Crowley in New York, and she's a socialist.
But she's a Democratic socialist.
She's a Democratic socialist. Excuse me.
So let me jump in here.
Hold on, Congressman.
Well, Stephanie, if the question is whether we need to get off our butts and start talking to people and find where the energy is in our own party, sign me up. And I don't care if you knock out every incumbent in the Democratic Party, as long as we start doing some things that matter in this country for families like mine that need it. If you're talking about Roe v. Wade now, you're talking about the Windsor decision, you're talking about affirmative action, you're talking about every critical thing we've put in place over the last 20, 30 years is on the line. I don't care who's in Democratic leadership, but I want all of us to do more. And I think the only way we're going to do that is to get our act together on this election. And there's plenty of reasons to do it, from guns to the Supreme Court to everything else we've seen this administration come after. By the way, with Justice Kennedy, they enshrined the Muslim ban and they screwed organized labor this week. So we shouldn't need another reminder.
I think that's a very good point. Derek, you were making a point?
Yeah, for us, go time for us, state of emergency for us, any member of the U.S. Senate seeking re-election who depend on African-American vote, they better think twice if they cut a deal and not be obstructionists on this question. This is a non-negotiable for the African-American community, so any member of the U.S. Senate, be them Democrat or Republican, who rely on African-American votes, this is non-negotiable. If you cut a deal, you will not get our votes. That's what it means
for
for
the Latino
us.
community, because we're going to be seeing potentially tests on DACA, tests on what if the president decided to ban immigrants from Central America.
Right.
We could even see cases reaching the high court that deal with the family separations. So these are all issues that, again, very much resonate with Latinos. And Stephanie, I know you're a little skeptical of values. Sounds like you're skeptical of the value of marches and taking to the streets. Let me tell you, as someone who has covered and participated in these when I was younger, there is a value in this because, number one, it's just participating in democracy. But number two, on a practical level, like, you know, every one of these marches, you go there, there's always voter registration.
Ding, ding, ding.
You meet other people who are like-minded. You meet people, maybe they're not with your specific issue, but they're part of the cause. And then you realize we're not separate groups of LGBT and Latinos and African Americans and women's rights. We are potentially a force to be reckoned with. That's the value of marches,
the beauty
the
and the
commonality.
inspiration
It's
of
a
this
force
cornucopia of ideas. To me, it looked like it's lost in the last 2 years to Trump, who rocks up with three-word slogans.
But I believe it's coming back. We see incredible activism and motivation among Democrats and progressives on the ground. So I feel that we will see that, you know, maybe some pushback to that.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.